transport is poised to be insightful and forward thinking event focusing on sustainability in the realm of transportation. Today's webinar will expect a comprehensive discussion of the strategies, innovations, and technological advancements driving the shift towards achieving net zero carbon emissions in the logistics and transport sectors. Our panel of experts will shed light on the following key takeaways, that is, developing net zero mobility strategies require a comprehensive and integrated approach involve the entire logistics and transport ecosystem, and what are the technological advancements such as electrification, sustainable fuels, and data driven logistics are crucial for achieving net zero emissions in the sector. Also, we'll be discussing about collaborative approaches among industry stakeholders to address the unique challenges of net zero mobility in logistics and transport. With this, we'll discuss what are the clear and supportive regulatory frameworks, incentives, and standards that play a critical role in accelerating the transition to net zero mobility. After this, we'll have a Q&A session when you can ask questions. You have our speakers. But here I would like to make a small announcement. Uh, First, attendees can post their questions in the Q&A box and the speakers will answer at the end of the session. So prior to commencing today's session, we'll start with a presentation by Mr. Aditya, who is the Associate Director at Deloitte, setting the context and offering valuable insights for today's discussion on achieving net zero mobility and logistics. Thank you, sir. The screen is yours.
Yeah. So thanks, Priyanshi. I think I'll quickly jump on to the presentation that I have because I would like to spend more time in discussions that would be crucial. So let me share my screen unless anyone wants to sort of add something. All right, I'll just go ahead. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So essentially, we are. Thank you everyone for first of all joining in. We've got people from all facets of the industry today, and I just wanted to take about 5-10 minutes, 10 odd minutes to set the context so that the discussions can flow through. We have Vivek, who's a senior partner with EY, who will be also moderating the session. So I would then pass it on to him. Having said that, what we are essentially going to talk about is the current landscape. What we see is based on a different policy regulatory push which has taken place across the globe. We have seen tremendous amount of proliferation of electric mobility. Key policies which are driving across the globe. Every country has developed their own policy. Some are focused on carbon, dedicated to carbon reduction. Some are focused on talking about numbers of EVs, and that's the lens that they are giving. Then there are countries like Canada who are allowing the market forces to take charge of things, so that the regulations do not come into play. So typically, what Canada has done is very interesting. They've set zero emission vehicle targets, but not really any sort of regulations around it, and they're looking at devising a credit system where the credits can be exchanged as you penetrate more and more EVs in the market. So that sort of a lens. Whereas in India we have the famed FAME scheme, which has now taken I mean quite a lot of evolution, and that's where we stand. We have different kinds of subsidies, tax reductions, and also incentivization on capital, as well as the charging pieces. So that's that. Moving on. So that's
There's a slide is actually inside. You need to full screen, sir. Just that.
it is full screen from my end.
Actually, in the view, it's not visible as a full screen. I mean, the presentation should be on slideshow mode. I mean,
Is it better now?
So actually you have shared your full screen. Can you just share the presentation like you did in the practice session? It's the
Now?
wrong tab which is being showed.
I think there's a glitch.
No, no, it's the infinity screen. I think you just have to uh, close the sharing, and when you're sharing the next thing, just share the specific window.
This is not allowing me that option, unfortunately. So is it visible now, my screen?
No.
Um, so can you share the PPT with us and then we can convert into
I have shared the PDF with you. You can go ahead and share it.
Okay, sure, sure, sure. I'll just do that. Allow me a
Yeah.
minute. Shruti, are you there with us? Can you share the PPT with us on the screen? And then we can change slides according to Aditya sir. I'll just connect with Shruti.
I think in interest of time,
Yeah.
you can start engaging.
Yeah, I think that's fine by me. What I wanted to just uh, maybe I think we can probably get on with the questions if that's
No, that's okay. I think maybe you can the central message around different areas of net zero that you wanted to bring in. Maybe you can just start with that.
Yeah, so I'll just touch upon those elements. So while we spoke of how the policy regulatory landscape has changed, a lot is happening on the ground as well. So when it comes to, let's say, the e-mobility landscape, it is yeah, it's primarily, I mean, I would say amongst the countries, Norway is kind of leading it today. Likes of India are coming in play, but we have kind of reached up to close to 1 million odd penetration of electric vehicles. But we have a lot of I would say startups who have come into play. Players in the chargings on the demand side, I would say, have come into play. Players on the supply side have come into play. So all in all, both these elements have got to play a role. Then yeah, I can see that. So you can move to the third slide. Yeah, second slide rather. Yeah, yeah. Next slide. Perfect. Next. Yeah. So this slide sort of gives you the overall picture of which countries who's lagging where. For instance, I would say Norway. They have today they have reached a level of close to 85% penetration. We are lagging. India is lagging somewhere around 1 to 2%. That's how we stand, and that's a function of not just policy and regulatory intervention, but also the market forces, as I say. So the subsidies that we have seen across the globe, they have been multifolds as compared the capital subsidies. They have been multifolds as compared to what we have had in India. However, the uptick of three wheelers and two wheelers in India has been quite phenomenal. So that's what is currently driving the Indian EV space. And as we look, yeah, so you can move on to the next slide. And as we increase the overall uh, charging infrastructure penetration, we would also see four-wheelers coming into play. Already, a lot of companies are coming forward and moving towards EVs. In terms of, for instance, if you look at a lot of companies have taken targets around EVs of converting their IC, or rather penetrating EVs within their own ecosystem. So, likes of Tata Motors and have gone for internal carbon pricing, where they say that a certain level of carbon price is something that we need to put on a revenue so that we can reduce the component of ICEs and increase the component of EVs. So these are some of the channels which corporations are taking for to sort of penetrate more and more EVs. A lot of R&D going on in the space, as we have seen it. For instance, a set of electric vehicle companies are looking at pure battery electric vehicles, whereas others like the Japanese, you can say the Marutis and the Toyotas of the lot are still sort of pushing for hybrids. So that's also one area of discussion we can probably have as we go forward. So that just wanted to highlight on the two thought processes around EVs. Just go ahead. On the sustainable charging piece, probably we can discuss on how we can accelerate the penetration of renewable energy for these charging stations, because there's a lot of debate which is going on today in terms of are EVs truly carbon neutral, or are they truly green. So with respect to that, especially in India, because the grid is still quite carbon intensive. There is some disturbance somewhere. I think if everybody can go on mute, that will be better. Thank you. So yeah. So the way we are looking at things here is, how do we accelerate the renewable energy penetration for charging in infrastructure? We are looking at policies around open access being opened up in India, especially the new green open access rules coming into play, which is looking at, we can harness renewable energy to any sort of locations. So those efforts are going on. However, we do not have a dedicated policy or some sort of regulation in place which will help greening the charging infrastructure. Today, we are more relying on proliferating the charging infrastructure than actually greening it. So that's where we stand. I can move ahead on the slide. Yeah. So that's something we can possibly take up during the discussions. Yes, corporations, I mean, a lot of the panelists out here would be involved in supplying fleets to different corporations. So for instance, Amazon, corporations like Amazon, Zomato, HCL, they are looking at greening their fleets. So Amazon is looking at improving their last mile delivery. HCL is concentrating more on employee vehicle greening of their employee vehicles. They have dedicated vehicles for ferrying their employees for business purpose, as well as you know from home to their offices. So that's the space they are looking at increasing the EVs. Zomato, again, around last mile delivery. So these are some of the players in India we can see who are doing that. Certainly there are challenges around it when we say, because the uh, cost of EVs or the battery cost still needs to be sort of competitive. That is one area. Then different states have got different EV charging tariffs. That sort of becomes a challenge in terms of viability of for deploying vehicles in certain states. So while there are challenges, a lot of corporations are taking initiatives around this, and I'm sure my panelists would sort of add on to it because they are working in that space. You can go ahead. Yeah, something that I already touched upon. While I just wanted to emphasize one thing on this slide is, while we see the policies and regulations coming onto play for enhancing EVs, the, uh, the, the, the CNG in the four-wheeler space, we are going to also see cost competitiveness coming from CNG based vehicles. So when we look at the estimates of between 2025 from today to 2025, we are looking at an uptick of close to 15-20% in three-wheelers and four-wheeler space. But in two-wheelers, we are seeing a multifold because you don't have CNG options there. That's why it's more feasible to sort of go for EVs. From the cost competitiveness point of view, I just wanted to highlight something that we can also talk about. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so this is more around, I would say, industrial. We already covered this somewhere or the other. But a few things this slide talks about is on the initiatives that corporations are taking, like employee incentivization can be done. Uh, Giving land or housing charging infrastructure within their own premises can also be looked at. Greening of fleets targets has already been taken. So KPIs around that are being developed by corporations, and route optimization through digital channels is also something that is getting leveraged, so that we can have more of sustainable transportation when it comes to, even if it is EVs. Yeah, probably go ahead. Yeah, some collaborations today we have in the world, which are sort of working towards this. While I don't want to spend time on this, it's always good when multiple platforms come, or multiple corporations come together on a single platform and do this, because this is not a one stop solution or one technology provider trying to solve the problem. We'll have to join hands, because it is more like so it's multiple players will have a say in this, especially when it comes to reduction of emissions, or greening their fleet, because this is not directly in under the purview of the organization, but there are other parties who are also sort of coming to the fore. So for instance, if while you intend to go for EVs, if your charging infrastructure is not green, how are you going to how are you going to say that you're truly sustainable? So multiple players, like be it renewable developers, be it charging point operators, be it EV providers, all have to come together sort of to do that. And we have platforms globally established, like Sirius is something which is there in North America. Accelerating to Zero, A to Z, as we call it, is in Europe. World Business Council is doing a gamut of things around sustainability, and EV is one part of it. I can just go ahead. I just wanted to. That's the last piece I want to talk about, is on some of the Indian collaborations that we have. While there are global platforms in place, individual collaborations or local level collaborations are also being done. So be it in technology, so technology partnerships coming into play, where Honda, eMobi, and yeah, so where Honda and eMobi have come together to sort of deploy EVs or increase EV penetration by bringing in technology. We have commercial tie-ups, which where EKA has come forth with Pune Municipal Corporation deploying EVs for wagon tipplers for collecting garbage. So that's one area where collaborations are happening. And then you have another kind of partnerships, like the financing partnerships, where likes of EcoFi are coming forward to fund offer innovative structures for e-vehicle financing. So that's that. And so I spoke about multiple things, but we can choose our battles in the interest of time and probably get on with the questions. But this is broadly what I wanted to sort of highlight. Yes, I think I'm done. But yeah, if anything anyone wants to sort of say, please. Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, for the insightful presentation. So now it's time to move ahead with the panel discussion, and I will hand it over to Mr. Vivek, and I will welcome all the esteemed panelists on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Privanshi. Thank you, Aditya, for a very insightful presentation. And I'd like to first welcome all of my panelists. It's a very, very important subject that we're discussing today. And before I start asking questions, maybe, I could put it in a perspective of how we're going to discuss. See, I think, from the presentation of Aditya and generally also, we all know that mobility sector is one of the main causes of pollution in our cities. Greenhouse gases, it is about 8 metric gigatons that it contributes. It's the third largest problem that we have at hand. And we also know that automakers and the industry in general is following a regimented process of transitioning to greener alternatives. And all manufacturers globally have pledged investment of trillions of dollars to really build new products, new systems that would help us transition to newer goals that we are setting forward. But I think it's very important to also look at how government, private sector, and communities at large come together to solve this. It's not something that automakers or the industry alone can solve. Therefore, it becomes very important to look at how are we really building global supply chains and partnerships. Very important because if we have to really take one Earth kind of view, it's important to look at a global scale. How do we ensure we are able to accelerate towards the goal? Let's also look at how technology is made available. Emerging tech and new technologies are made available to countries and corporations at parity. Important to look at how do we build fast and how do we industrialize fast, because it's not just about building a product, but how does it really reach to the market? How do we create those linkages through manufacturing processes, through market linkages, etc. Talent is going to be a question, when we're talking about going to a electrified regime or to other alternate fuels. How do we see market managing the vehicles, the services, and so on and so forth? And inside the ecosystem itself, do we have enough talent available? Therefore, how do we upskill, cross skill, etc.? I'm a big fan of interoperability. Therefore, I believe interoperability and standardization is one key question that needs to be answered because that's the only way we can democratize access to technology and proliferate it at a faster pace. And finally, very very important, right policy regime. So I think I've got really good speakers out here, and we would discuss all of these, and try and see how we can bring something that really we all take important points home and try and have our own to-do list. I would start with a policy perspective. Maybe I can start with Dr. Nivedita. How do you think policies affect uptake of EVs? Particularly when we look at India, it is about two-wheelers and four-wheelers a lot, and that's a lot of homework to do in that area. And there are generally questions around total cost of ownership. Is the charging station available, not available? Anxiety around that. I think the range anxiety is history now. It's about being able to, we started with range anxiety, but I think that's history. But we really need to bring this clearly to people that no matter what, you will be able to charge. So maybe we can start with Dr. Nivedita.
Thank you, sir. Great question. So I'll just highlight the kind of work that we do at ICT. It's International Council on Clean Transport, and we usually work at various levels of policies informing the government as to what they should do. For example, one of the recent works that we did that got transformed into a draft policy is the battery swapping policy. So we worked with Niti Aayog, and they had asked us to kind of look at what kind of use cases uh, can be, incentivized. And in that case, we actually looked at the different kind of use cases, mainly commercial and personal use of two wheelers. This was specifically on two wheelers. What we found is incentivizing two wheelers on for personal use is not of great help. Whereas if you actually incentivize commercial vehicles in last mile and ride hailing, it actually takes care of the opportunity cost loss that kind of crops up in the total TCO analysis of two wheelers. So that is one part that we worked on. And so what we saw here is if you actually have to incentivize something and bring up two wheelers into adoption, especially in B2B operations, you actually have to incentivize battery swapping because that is the quickest way of charging a two wheeler, and you actually save a lot of time that a vehicle would take up to charge its two wheeler. And if you see the amount of distance, so if I explain it in a little broader term, the total distance a commercial two wheeler
Nivedita,
travels.
I'm so sorry. I'm just barging in. There's
Yeah,
too much disturbance. Even I cannot hear this properly. Um, Anyone else hear
is
me?
it from my end? Is it from my end?
I have no idea.
No, I think for me it's clear. The voice is clear.
Mm, I am having a disturbance, so I think if everyone can go on mute, that will help while the other person is speaking.
Yeah, I think probably everybody else should go on mute. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. So what we found is since commercial two-wheelers have a larger distance to travel, almost 110 kilometers per day compared to personal vehicles which travel very less. In that sense, actually, the number of charging events that come up for these commercial two-wheelers is quite high. And given that opportunity cost is quite a high component in total cost of ownership when we calculate it for different use cases, it makes a lot of sense to kind of have policies towards this. And that is where it got the recommendations that came out from this study that was funded by NDCTIA. It's Nationally Determined Contributions for Transport in Moving Asia. It's a partnership between India, Vietnam, and China to work on decarbonization projects. We actually came up with this policy, recommended to the findings to Niti Aayog, and that something came up as a draft policy on battery swapping recently as last year, I think 2022. So that's one of it. So that's one of the policy, how it affects two-wheeler adoption in India, especially in B2B sector. The other thing we looked at policy was in four-wheeler adoption. We looked at kind of some sample vehicle in terms of Tata Nexon and Mahindra. And what we found is, though with the incentives, the FAME incentives and the state incentives, so they basically this work was primarily for Delhi. Though these incentives actually make the TCO comparable to diesel and petrol vehicles, but with CNG, the CNG still wins, and we all know how CNG is. So what we did basically, we kind of tried to put in additional policies and do a kind of sensitivity analysis to see what are those additional policies that can bring it down. I mean, make it comparable. The EVs can be made comparable to CNGs, and what we found is investment on fast charging. The second one is, I think, having state funding same as the central fame scheme, as well as I think waiver on the financial cost, because what we had found is the upfront cost is the highest in TCO analysis, the baseline scenario analysis. The financing cost is actually one of the highest component in the total TCO. So basically hitting on these three costs, apart from the incentives, apart from the state and I mean central government incentives, having fast charging and financing cost, having a lower financing rate, interest rate, actually makes your four-wheeler comparable to CNGs in some time. And I think this we did for the, I mean, four-wheeler ride-hailing vehicles primarily. So we had taken kind of all the distances it travels over a year and all those, very uh, detailed analysis in terms of how it fares. So this is something we kind of the kind of policy studies we actually do to reflect that how policies that Indian government brings up, or probably propose new policies which in addition to the existing policies can actually bring down the cost of total ownership, and kind of create a landscape for adoption of EV two-wheelers or four-wheelers in India. So that is that on that. And yeah, so you can have a look at our work in ICCT's website. We recently launched our office in Delhi as well. So look for work and collaborations with all of you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, really inspiring as to how you're looking at uh, the work in finding the real incentives and how we should really bring in policy perspectives to accelerate, the net zero goals. My second question would be to Abbas. See, it's very important to look at uh, how do we really have a sustainable way of achieving net zero goals. And manufacturers need to have a strategic view on how that's going to happen, and particularly in B2B process, because everybody's actions are linked. So therefore, my question is, what are the common strategies and commitments vehicle manufacturers have towards achieving net zero? And second, how do manufacturers commonly assist their B2B customers in reaching sustainability targets? How are they interlinked? How do they ensure, one, they're measuring that, they have a strategic view, and they're going in the common direction?
Yeah, thank you, Vivek sir. Uh, I'm glad to be part of this panel, to be honest. And so, answering your first question, sir, there are so partnerships can happen in various ways. First, it begins with the battery and the route energy, and then how things are going to go ahead in terms of the charging infrastructure, energy infrastructure. So, and then obviously the finances. So, there have been various partnerships happening in terms of the battery and the chargers. And we have good few players in the market, especially in the B2B market, who've been collaborating with each other and helping each other in achieving their common set of goals. Few recent partnerships, these partnerships have actually been going on since 2019, as Aditya sir was also saying that Rivian started with Amazon in 2019 for 10,000 EVs. Similar set of partnerships have been more common in the B2B, especially the e-commerce segment, and in the last mile deliveries. But we do not see those kinds of collaborations happening in the other segments, which is where we are facing some issues. I'm working with a company called Microgrid Labs. We've been doing the fleet electrification and transition strategies. So when we go to all of these OEMs or manufacturers, there are advancements and things happening, but every one of the OEMs want to have their own set of intellectual property uh, rights over their data, so they do not want to usually share those data points. But there have been some good collaborations. One specifically, which everyone must have seen, is Magenta delivering your couriers now. They have tied up with Tata. They've ensured last mile deliveries to be electric. Mahindra has also tied up with Bolt Earth, which is a CPO. They help in managing the charging. So in that case, there are collaborations happening, but there are some places where things are still happening in silos, and there should be strategic partnership between them so that things can actually accelerate faster. I mean, there were few cases wherein the systems are undersized or oversized, and that actually causes issues. So there were have been few issues about it, but these strategic partnerships, we suppose and we hope that these strategic partnerships which actually pave the way for the future. Yeah, I
Thank
think
you,
I
thank you, thank you, Abbas. I was trying to find my unmute button. Sorry for that. Okay, so switching gears, I think Okay, we looked at policy side of it. We're looking at B2B side of it. But what is, I think eventually we're all talking about sustainability. How are charging solutions really contributing to sustainability? Because I believe, unless and until you've got the whole value chain captured in terms of sustainability, you're still not doing enough. And what are the challenges in that? How do we really navigate those challenges? My question is to Aditya and Tanveer, because I think both of you have a very clear view on this. And maybe
Yeah,
Aditya can start, and then Tanveer
sure.
could add to.
So just to probably give you the context that we've been working as project management consultants with a lot of platforms in establishing charging infrastructures, and it's not, and our goal is not to just establish charging infrastructure, but also to increase the renewable energy penetration, or make them green, make these charging stations green. Now, the key challenge, there are two ways. I mean, if you ask me about sustainable transportation or truly green transportation, there are probably two ways of looking at it. One is if you look at pure play EVs, which are being powered directly by renewable energy. That is one. Else, there is another school of thought which is on the hydrogen-based fuel cell vehicles. So we are looking at, but then there we are again looking at green hydrogen, which is again our distant dream. Having said that, what practically we can do today is really rely on opening up the policy and the regulatory structures we have for harnessing green power directly for charging stations. Today, there are restrictions around open access, wherein you can procure power from a renewable plant, but the restriction is that you need to have at least minimum of 1 megawatt of consumption, or for that matter, there are regulations which are going about, which are wanting to reduce this 1 megawatt threshold to the 100 kilowatt. That is through the green open access rules that that have been envisaged. But having said that, for EVs, even 100 kilowatts is high. So if you're looking at, let's say, a couple of charging stations, you're talking of a load of 30-40 kilowatts. So for, especially for, if we can have an enabling environment, a regulatory environment which brings down this further, or we have some sort of lacks around supplying renewable energy to charging stations, or if we can even have a net metering sort of a mechanism specifically for EV charging stations. These are some of the broad areas which we are working at. We're also looking at how can we look at peer-to-peer sort of adjustments around renewable energy. So those are some of the thoughts and ideas which have been worked upon. We are working with a lot of think tanks in this space. We are working with platforms like the Climate Pledge in accelerating EVs. So yeah, and not just accelerating EVs, accelerating sustainable transportation. That's where I would sort of stop. But I would want my other panelists to sort of take over and give his view as well.
No, thanks, Aditya. Thanks, Vivek. So, hi everyone. Uh, just a quick background. So, I am Tanveer. Have over decade and a half experience in sustainability, clean tech, and over half of this has been the electric mobility domain. So, quickly, over the last 6 7 years, focusing on battery swapping as one of the solutions to accelerate e-mobility in India. I think there are a lot of things which, so we are still very nascent. Like Aditya, you were mentioning, we're still very nascent. Uh, Obviously, everyone thinks that on-site solar is the easiest solution when it comes to making charging infra green. But I think it starts from first the equipment. Our equipments are still not star rated, right? A lot of charging infra, swapping infra, which is being installed there is no proper star rating. There are still a lot of gaps in the efficiency of it. So a lot of there is a lot of heat loss. There is a lot of power loss in just running those equipments, which ideally should not be there. I think the first step is to have star rated equipments and ensure a strict compliance there. Obviously, the second step is when it comes to sustainability. A lot of these equipments that we put out there, uh, there's a lot of theft, there's a lot of breakage, there's a lot of dismantling, there's a lot of just, we still don't have the right ecosystem of efficiently using it, efficiently disposing it off. And I think that's also adding to it. And as you rightly said, sun more like your solar is something which will be the solution, but with the current norms and current guidelines, that's not so right now. So we need to focus on innovative business models. Uh, we were working with a few partners a few years back, and charging infra in a hub and spoke model, swapping infra in a hub and spoke model, where the hub is able to get 1 megawatt, able to consume 1 megawatt of solar energy. That's one way to go about it. Otherwise, everything is very small. And like, for example, we know warehouses, we know logistic warehouses, they have put solar and they have excess solar. So maybe in a very fragmented manner, they have been offering solar energy for charging charging the vehicles, but that's very fragmented and not scalable. But I still think the first step is to standardize the equipment, standardize the star ratings, work on the policy with the government when it comes to open access. These two things will pave the way for making the charging infra more sustainable.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Tanvir.
Hi,
Uh,
Vivek. Sorry, I'd just like to add a little to this. I think the
go ahead,
perspective.
Aditya.
So, just to bring a little broader perspective, we are a company called FreshBus. We do intercity bus operations. So, a typical depot that we have consumes around 1.5 megawatt of power in a day. So, this is completely different from the statistics that I just got to hear. So, it's huge, right? And we have four such
Yeah.
depots. And another thing that I think which is generally being ignored when we are having a discussion about sustainable charging, as on today, 41.6% of our energy as a nation comes from renewable energy sources. This is the latest data from MNRE, and this has seen a tremendous increase in the last 2 years. I mean, if you go by 2021 numbers, we were somewhere around 30%. Right now, we are at 41.6, and the pace at which we are going, probably a decade from now, that I wouldn't be surprised if that number is around 70, 80. So that is something that we should be proud of as an Indian, if we are right now talking about 41.6% coming from renewable energy. So in the larger picture, where the usage is very high, as an operator who uses around 1.5 megawatt per day, what I would rather look at is partnerships or collaborations which would increase the asset utilization. For example, we run intercity buses, so the likelihood that we will use any of our charger beyond 10 p.m. is unlikely because all the buses start by then. Now, I have a depot which is like a good 1250 kVA transformer with like 600-700 kilowatt of load, which could easily charge probably 200 bikes at a time. Now, I have this slack period between 10 p.m. to like say 2 a.m., even if my first service starts at 4 a.m. That is a huge opportunity because the cost of setting up a depot for me is 1.5 crore. Now, that is where I think we'll have to be collaborative and smart to make sure that we are using our resources effectively as an ecosystem, because it is very difficult for a player who's small to go get an approval for 500 kilowatt, because just the security deposit is around 15 lakh. So I think there is a much larger picture if we think beyond just the two-wheeler and four-wheeler, especially on the commercial operation side. And that is where I think there should be a leveraging from, I mean, the opportunity from the higher players.
If I may
Thank you.
just add on to what Abhinav sir was saying, um, I totally agree, sir. I mean, 1.5 megawatts is quite immense, and there is too much of money that is being capital money that is being spent upon it. There is one thing
Absolutely.
that should actually happen with the private operators who are operating in intercity as well as intra-city approaches, should be to actually manage this load and the utilization, because otherwise we'll have high chances of coincidental power demands, and the utility
Absolutely.
providers will start facing issues. So that is where this is an example and a experience that is coming to us, where a utility provider is talking to us on managing this high coincidental power demands. So I totally agree that these operations are quite difficult to manage and difficult to assess, because these problems were quite new.
True.
Thanks. Uh, we certainly would be running out of time soon, so I need to kind of be the cop here and ask the questions to the other panelists also. So maybe moving on, I think we talked about policy, we talked about what B2B is trying to do, how are they going to solve sustainability. End of the day, if the operator is not making the right decision and making money, all of this has no meaning. So therefore, I think the operator's view is very, very important. What are the challenges that operators are facing in terms of one, moving towards a sustainable mode of transportation, and second, how do they see what kind of challenges are they going to see when they're aligning to net zero, but how do they really ensure they are making right business decisions, they're able to make money while delivering these services. So I think it's very important. While some of the regulatory actions will force us to do parts of it, but if it has to mainstream, it has to make sense. So my question is to Gitanjali and Abhinav both. Both of you are in those operations. So to Gitanjali, what are the key strategies that operators need to really put in place when you look at net zero emissions in your fleet operations?
Wonderful. Thank you for the question, Vivek. Hi, everyone. I'd request you to go on mute because I think there's echo. All right, thank you. So to start with, let's take a step back. I represent Lithium Urban Technologies. Now, Lithium is one of India's largest B2B electric mobility service provider. And I think Aditya, you missed that on your slide when you were talking about the leading front runners. So I'd like to remind you of that. Secondly, one is what we've seen in the landscape also, the corporate EV market adoption is at about 1% today. Okay, so we are not very proud of it. It is making progress, especially in the corporate employee segment. But one of the largest and the fastest growing segment happens to be the global capability centers, or the GCCs, or companies who are global and are present in India now. And I think from the span of clients we have, which is about a good 90 plus, we've seen these are early adopters, the front runners who really want sustainability in thought, word, and action. And thus they know clearly, as everyone mentioned, transportation is one of the biggest, the largest pollutant. So you can make a heavy impact if you just work on changing the way you transport things or how you look at mobility in your organization. Now, given that we are a service provider, I speak as a fleet owner. And what we've tried to do is, see, we spoke about a couple of things, and I think we've made note from all my co-panelists here. Nivedita spoke about, how investment in fast charging is required. She spoke about how capex on the DCO model is really high, right? And that's where I think our innovations has really helped us, and I'd like to speak a little bit about that. Ours is a 100% owned vehicle, and that gives us complete control over how we want to sweat our asset, which was also another point I think that the panelists mentioned. Now the DC model, what happens is every time the driver is sleeping, the car is sleeping too, right? And you can make the maximum buck for the asset is only when you sweat the asset. So what we've managed to do very successfully for our base and in our fleet is operate on a 24-hour model with two drivers, so that the vehicle, the asset, is always sweating.
but at the same time the service provider is not tired, so you're taking care of his health and his driving rest and so on and so forth. Now what this does is and helps us do is efficiently give also a value proposition to the clients who initially. So our first reaction, when we're meeting our first time client, is always, your electric vehicle is 2x an ICE. The cost is the jumping factor which pounds on you. And I think what we've realized is with our model, we've been able to mitigate that. Since the asset is being sweated, that to your client at efficient cost so that they can run. The point that I'm getting at is, we will need to keep innovating models to deliver value to the client so they see merit. Because sustainability, yes, has to happen. Sustainable mobility transition, yes, has to happen. But it also has to have economic viability and sustainability, right? Otherwise, it makes no sense to anyone. And while I speak about the demand side of it, what the customer wants and so on, there is also a supply side to it, right? I think looking back when we started our operations, we started with two-door e-tools. And our first client was Tesco in Bangalore and 15 e-tools. I think models have changed. Newer models have come. There is a vast variety to choose from. The ranges have gone up of the vehicle. So also there is, a lot of change happening there. Do you have a like-to-like comparison to give to the clients and to give to audiences saying, all right. And like I think Abhinav was saying about big form factors. Big form factors are new. Putting an electric bus is probably a much more mammoth task than I talk about when it comes to four wheelers, and Abhinav would agree, smiling. So, and I think what we really need to do is uh, keep innovating, collaborate. Since we are an inclusive fleet, our charging stations, again, we've invested in charging fronts. We have about 100 plus fast chargers across 19 cities, which are for our fleets, so that our vehicles do not have to travel. We do not have any open ones apart from one in Delhi. But I think we are taking care of that because putting vehicles is easy. Putting an infrastructure around is a bigger part, right? And that's where I think most of our clients also support us because our charging stations are at their location. So that it's convenient for them to run efficient operations when it comes to ferrying their employees, right? So that was one point I wanted to make. Also, I think what we're trying to do is companies are looking at, the early adopters at least are thought word in action, like I mentioned, but there's also a lot of greenwashing that happens. If you have 100 fleet and you put 4 cars with electric, and I think that has to change. Sustainability has to be adopted in the true sense, and which does not restrict only to mobility. I think it's much more than mobility. It's also renewable energy sources that we spoke about, water, waste management, and so on and so forth. And I think that is where collaboration comes into play very effectively of how people come together. And I completely agree. And I think it was Aditya who said sustainability is not a one woman or a man job. It needs individuals to come together, communities to come together, countries to come together if need be, and make it at large, make a difference at large. So I think to summarize, what should we do as a fleet operator? One is keep innovating models, come up with models that are palatable, that are financially viable, try to sweat the asset and come up with integrated built models. Adapt technology, it's very important. It's very important, and all our cars, all the entire fleet of 3000 plus cars is connected. That enables us to efficiently deliver operations on ground because there's a lot of data flowing in. There's a lot of intelligence happening on mapping, on what routes to take, not to take, time efficiencies to be built in, and so on and so forth, which is indirectly helping the client to also optimize how their people can get to work safely, reliably, and on time. And in a vehicle post COVID, I think hygiene has become a mandate. And in a vehicle which is safe and which is green, so it adds to that flash value and a pride factor, saying here we are, and we are without even moving the landscape of the city or the nation. We're adding to green miles and growing trees. So I think that's where I will be. Innovation is a must. Adoption of technology is a must. A lot of data churning and making operations efficient. I think that's how we keep going.
Thank you. So maybe, Abhinav, your view on what are the typical challenges as a corporate or a commercial fleet operator when you're looking at transition to electric or to any other clean tech, that's what I would ask you.
Sure, Vivek. I think it's money, money, money to begin with, uh, because it's a clear 2x just on the vehicle to vehicle comparison. But like Gitanjali was saying, the charging infrastructure is a killer, because we are looking at just because of the sheer quantum of power that we're looking at. So I think an ideal model where we would be really efficient as an ecosystem is if we work in a charging hub model. For example, like every city has a private bus stand or a typical bus stand. Are you able to hear me properly, or is there disturbance?
I'm sorry, I think it's my gray hair not listening to the mute. I think he dropped.
Yeah, I think he dropped.
Okay, by the time comes back, maybe I would ask a question to Shrikant. What's your view around two wheelers and three wheelers? Because I think it would be really little different than the large form factor vehicles.
Yeah. Thanks, Vivek. Just to give a brief, I'm Shrikant. I represent Hala Mobility. I'm one of the founders here. Hala is an energy and mobility as a service platform where we try to integrate different fleet operators, different two wheelers and three wheelers onto the platform, and try to create and make that utilization happening through different demand factors that we have, right? We today serve in Hyderabad with 3,000 plus fleets spreading across last mile, quick commerce, e-commerce, delivery folks, delivery companies. So the biggest problem, or the challenges that these companies come forward with are like saying two wheelers or three wheelers are like high upfront costs, the range anxieties, the charging infrastructure. How do we do this? It is from the beginning, what I believe is in a transition that we're taking from the combustion vehicles to electric vehicles, collaboration is a key, and we need to have platforms that can aggregate all of them together, try to create that demand, create a cross utilization factor, and that is when every stakeholder is happy, right? So the companies face challenges in terms of finding the right electric vehicle, finding the right service partner, finding the nearest charge point or a service center, right? How about bring them all together into a single platform and trying to create a utilization factor around it? Today, uh, uh, companies who are moving towards electric are primarily because of the government support that they are receiving, the sustainability goals that they have to achieve, or completely making impact on the environment side, because mobility again contributes to 40% of the pollution, right? And all these people are trying to move towards electric vehicles, but the challenges are as set. What we try to do here is aggregated all of these service providers trying to create utilization. We ran over 64 million kilometers to date, right? One of the potential partner is sitting here, Tanvir, who where we are trying to bring in a lot of fleets from them, trying to utilize their charging infrastructure, trying to create a swapping ecosystem, right? Quick commerce guys need a quick charging, so they can't rely on 3 hours of charging for their network. So they'll need a battery swapping as a solution. There are rapid charging solutions available, for food delivery companies or someone as such who want to rapidly charge them as short as 12 to 15 minutes of time. That's a typical time that we take if we go to a petrol bunk as well. And there are certain companies, certain last mile delivery companies, where they can have breaks in between. Like they go on a single stretch of 6 hours or 4 hours of stretch, go deliver the products, majorly e-commerce companies, and then come back. So by that time, they need to have one battery pack charged and swap them. During all this, there's going to be a downtime, right? So how do we address that downtime, and how do we address those? Because all these companies run on how well the vehicle is being up and how many number of deliveries am I making. So there needs to be some fleet that is available so that they can go quickly deliver the products. So uh, these are like few of the challenges that we hear day in day out in terms of how do I optimize my fleet, how do I run my fleet, how do I get my deliveries done in a quickest possible time. And the other challenge is I'm delivering the vehicles on electric two-wheelers or electric three-wheelers, but am I net zero? Which I think right now it's too early to talk about net zero because we are still consuming the same thermal energy that is being generated. So, investing more into the solar energy side, investing more into alternative ways of energies, again, in two wheelers, bringing up hydrogen is again not possible because of the real estate problems. But there are ways to bring it in the three wheelers and four wheeler spaces. That is the areas that we need to invest upon, and we need to bring in a lot of innovation, as the panelist also said. There are also different ways to set off our carbon footprint, at least in the last mile delivery e-commerce space, taking it from the packaging side, taking it from the delivery side, anything as such. Uh, you know, so in a nutshell, all the stakeholders, whoever are sitting here, we should all come together in trying to ensure that there is a net zero emission possible within the B2B space at least, which is a huge contributor for the mobility's pollution side. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Shrikant. Abhinav is back. I would want him to complete where he left, and we're already running out of time. I'll probably have time for one more question, and then we'll open it for Q&A. Abhinav,
Sure.
out to you.
I won't take more than a minute, keeping time in mind. So one of the things that comes to my mind, especially on the collaboration part, is in the intercity bus operation, I use 20% of my charge just to commute the city. So if I'm looking at, say, a 6 hour journey, 6 to 7 hour journey, which is my typical intercity trip, given the current day battery range, almost 2.5 hours of it and 20-25% of my SOC goes in navigating the city. But so here are two interesting interventions that can happen. If through policy there can be a bus hub where all private operators can operate from, and if they can align with any of the two-wheeler services like Hala, I've been seeing just now as Srikant was talking. So someone like Hala, if they can coordinate for all the customers to drop to that hub on an EV bike, then we are one helping each other, but also decongesting the city of the heavy vehicles and improving the utilization as well as the efficiency of the vehicle, because nobody wants to be stuck in traffic forever for 2.5 hours while commuting 20-25 kilometers. So these are the collaborations potentially I'm looking at. Yeah, I mean, lovely panel. I would love to talk to most of you of the once it is done, and thanks a lot for all the inputs and the opportunity.
No, thank you, Abhinav. I think you brought out a very very important point. I come from urban transportation background, so I do understand this pain very clearly. That unless we have the hierarchy of services built into our sustainability, and we move from a lower order hierarchy to the higher order hierarchy in terms of hub and spoke, we may not be able to solve it. Therefore, integrated mobility, have a multimodal interface which is seamless. All of that becomes very, very important. Part of discussion as part of our net zero, transition is concerned. So, a very important discussion in that sense. So maybe I think I had a list of many questions, but unfortunately we're running out of time. I'll probably have maybe the last question to Gitanjali and Nivedita, and so the question to Gitanjali is: do we really have what is a general view of what it means accelerating transition? Everybody's talking about it. How do we accelerate a transition? And do we believe collaborations is the way to accelerate transition? Do we believe communities need to be sensitized more for transition? Or is there something else that you believe is important? And then I'll have last question to Nivedita. Go ahead, please.
Well, it's a beautiful philosophical and very operational realistic question. To start with, it reminds me of analogy, and I think many years back, even when we were learning in academics, we were taught about this 3-point seat belt that an engineer called Niels Bohlin in 1959, I think, right? And if he would have chosen to patent it and keep it to himself, we wouldn't have a safer world today. And same but different, I'd like to say. Collaboration is a must, yes, whatever we can do, because that stems from the fact that I stated earlier. Sustainability is not one person job, and sustainable mobility is a very tiny subset, which creates a very large impact in the overall scheme of things in getting sustainable. When it comes to acceleration, the second point that I have in mind is, like I say, thought, word, and action all the time, and even to teams here and teams when we're working together. A change does not occur until the head, heart, and the hand are together, right? And that's in the truest sense what collaboration means for me. If you want to go somewhere, you cannot, please pardon my French on this very platform, but you can't half-ass it. You have to go the whole hog, right? You need to be in it to win it. And these are all pillars. It cannot be like, oh, I'm an exclusive player, I'm not going to share, there is no collaboration here. It cannot be that I want to do it, but I'm on the fence about it. Thoda sasta hoga kya, kitna hoga, kitni gaadiyan lagaoge. Because these are discussions we hear, and my heart aches when I attend some of these interactions when for people the glacier is melting somewhere else. And it is really hurtful to say no. Have you seen Bangalore rains? Have you been stuck for 3.5 hours on the road? That's the glacier speaking to you. That's a sign, right? So I think what really needs to be done is keep an open mind, and get into it completely and get dedicated to it. I think sustainable mobility, especially today, is happening because one, it's a top-down protocol. It's not a good to have, but certain part of it is a must have today. So you want to do whatever ticks the boxes, but you hesitate saying, PNL thoda hil raha hai. We don't want to go the whole hog. And so that, I think, certain deterrents to acceleration. But what I really mean when people say, and we ourselves say that we are, tomorrow's transportation today, and we're trying to help the accelerate the net zero journeys of organizations that are here, because we have actually, and I have the pleasure of working with brands that really truly are the front runners of this cause, right from what we see inside their office to outside their campus to our vehicles ferrying their people. And it's a delight to then deliver a 20 to 30% cost efficiency on transport to these people, because they're in it with you. It's not a vendor-vendee relationship anymore. You want to do something together, and that's how the community is built, when you have a common purpose and you're all working towards it, right? And the common purpose here is sustainable mobility. So as people come together, वो देना लोग जुड़ता गया, karma banta gaya, and then we win. So if we scale it together, and if we fail, God, we are doomed.
No, thank you so much. I think I love it. The way you have kind of put it in the perspective. It's not about just a commercial relationship. It's beyond that. Thank you so much, Nivedita. Your last question is: we've talked about a lot of partnerships and everything else. Uh, do we have an example of successful collaboration that has moved towards making net zero a reality? Maybe that's with that we would probably end this session.
Yeah. So I think when we have been looking at lot of these these studies and data around, so what we find, two of the factors that particularly are deterrents to adoption is, one is your upfront cost, in which basically your OEM should probably partner with financial institutions. For example, I think Ola Electric did a very recent collaboration with Reliance General Insurance to bring down the upfront cost, so that the drivers who are buying for driving in the fleet, they or leasing out these vehicles, they can have it at a comparatively very lower cost. That's one of them. Second one, when we looked at charging, is one of the pain points, a huge pain point for any of them. So I think Sun Mobility has partnered with Amazon, with Let's Transport, to kind of supply the batteries in terms of running their vehicles. The other day I was so I stay in Bangalore, somewhere around Electronic City, and I was kind of because of the traffic, I keep walking around the roads wherever I get a chance, and then I came across one of the Sun Mobility battery swapping stations. So you could see a swarm of these delivery boys there, waiting for their turn. And they are like, this is one of the best things that has happened to us that we have been actually able to you know d- have these vehicles at lower cost, do our work, and cover almost 110 to 150 kilometers a day. So I think the collaborations between OEMs and charging infrastructure is something like Sun Mobility, and I think recently also BPCL has collaborated with Ather for expanding its charging infrastructure. So these are the kind of collaborations which are needed to kind of bring the whole landscape to work together towards adoption. And the other thing also we have been looking at is the kind of the battery disposals that would come with uptake, with as you advance towards further uptake of EVs. That is something, a very important aspect that needs to be looked at, because I think probably somewhere IEA kind of reported that 300 billion dollars of waste is going to be generated. And that is somewhere, I think, another collaboration could happen for OEMs with battery recycling operators. Like Loham, I think, has kind of come together with Altigreen, somewhere kind of put together for this recycling of batteries. So these are the kind of very basic collaborations in terms of attaining sustainable mobility, which could be looked into.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Tanvir. You want to add?
Yeah, I was just adding a couple of points. Thanks. Vivek, if you can please. Yeah, so very well said, Nivedita. Actually, I was just adding a couple of points. So I think one thing which is also very important for B2B electric mobility to B2B mobility to move towards electric is government should look at putting this entire e-mobility into a priority sector lending. We've been talking about policy, we've been talking about stable policy. I think one of the key things is finance, as Abhinav rightly said, money, money, money. And the biggest cost, as Vivek and Aditya also pointed out upfront, is the cost of financing, cost of money. Right now, because traditional lenders are not able to underwrite uh, the startups and these products properly. So I think it starts from government putting that into priority sector lending. If that can happen, I don't think so. We need so much subsidies coming in. That will be a big game changer. That will also bring in stable policy, because today there is a lot of money sitting out there, right? We have investors we are talking to, they're sitting on the fences because they don't know whether FAME 3 will come, whether battery swapping policy will be implemented, whether there will be a new policy 2 years down the line which will change over everything, because we are in the state of affair in a state where a lot of things are subsidized, that they do not make a good business case for a long term investor. So stable policy, I think, will happen when larger things like priority sector lending are implemented. And coming to what Nivedita said, I think so. We are part of so a lot of batteries on our swapping network, as we are present in about 25 cities, and we are doing battery swapping for over 6,000 two-wheelers and three-wheelers. We are aware about electric battery recycling, and a lot of work is happening there for second life and third life. There is something called as extended producer responsibility, which government has mandated all manufacturers to have to comply to. However, as we there are a lot of gaps in it, so I think government needs to work with the recyclers to develop a proper organize chain where supply chain where these products can be picked up and given to the recyclers, rather than have middlemen in between. Because majorly what happens in India is there's a large unorganized market. So what's happening right now is these batteries are flowing into these unorganized markets, places in UP, places in Bihar, where in a small workshop without any safety these batteries are being opened up and put into a second use. That is something which is a big deterrent to whatever we are trying to achieve, whether it's net zero, whether it's transition 2030, everything. If some big mishaps start happening, that will be, I think, a big nail in the coffin for what we want to achieve here.
Thank you so much. And I thoroughly enjoyed last 1.5 hour great conversation. I think all of us are trying to do our bit to get to, as Gitanjali rightly said, you are in it or you're not in it. As simple as that. We're all in it, and I'm sure we are contributing in whatever small or big ways we are. But I think what's very clear is that it's an evolving landscape. There's a lot of there are a lot of moving parts around it, but I think we eventually will get there because I think the whole world is rallying around a better, brighter future. It's that simple. It's just, I think we have to take it as strong as our existential question around it. Do I mean this is something that we need to do, otherwise we will cease to exist in some 100 years. It's as simple as that. Maybe that's how urgent it is. But thank you so much. It was a great panel, great conversation. Really looking forward to connecting with you post this as well. Priyanshi, I think we have some questions, but we will completely run out of time.
No problem, sir. So what we can do is, if any of the speakers are have a little time, they can reply in the chat box itself, because there are a bunch of questions and we'll be quite late if we take all the questions.
Yes. So, do you want the panelists to reply on the chat itself?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, that
Okay,
sounds.
sir.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, all our esteemed panelists. A very special thanks to Vivek sir for the way you combined the various interests of the industry and related those to the interest of the panel of experts. Thank you so much once again. We promise to be back soon with another exciting session. And don't forget to join us in Net Zero Mobility Summit 2024, going to take place on 1st March in New York. Stay ahead of the world of the sustainability mobility. Please take care and have a good day ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye,
Thank you
everyone.
again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Thank you, everyone.